Hey, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Bird Brain 66 with your host, Brian Bretsch. He over there is Andy Teague. And we are joined this evening by a good friend, acquaintance of mine that I've known for many years back in the sports days. He's Steve Porter. Steve, welcome.
Brian, thanks for having me. Great to be with you guys. And we talk a little baseball. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Same with us. And just a little bit of background about Steve. He's been covering high school, college, Blues, Cardinals, even some of the old Big Red days going way back. I'll let him decide if he wants to tell us how many years he was at it before he officially retired. I'll let Steve do that. But anyway, we're going to talk, ladies and gentlemen, tonight about the 1964 Topps team. With that, Andy, I'm going to kick it over to you, and you can give us just a quick little overview about the team, maybe a favorite player or two, and then we'll jump in and pick the wealth of knowledge that Steve has about Cardinal baseball.
Well, if we're going to go ahead and start talking about this 64 team, we're going to go ahead and start off with this card. Not that it's any particular favorite or anything of mine, but, that's during the era of, my dad, my grandfather, and then passing along what they knew about the Cardinals and what they enjoyed about the Cardinals. But I'm going to go ahead and throw this individual up real quick when we're talking about the 64 Cardinals first, because he's the reason we got a Hall of Famer, by the name of Lou Brock. And unfortunately, Lou Brock is not in this particular 64 set, which is, a little bit of a shame, if they could have threw him in on a high number or something. But I wanted to start off with that. And what Bob Gibson described at the time as the worst trade ever. So, and I just saw that quote a few months ago when I was at the Cardinal Hall of Fame Museum again. So I always get a laugh out of that every time I see that. So,
Andy, when the Cardinals made the trade, they were 28-31, and they were just wallowing in the middle of the pack or even the second division. And then once they got Brock, things started to take off for them. And oddly enough, most people remember Brock as leadoff hitter for the Cardinals. But when they first got him, he hit second. Flood was a leadoff hitter. Even in the World Series, because Dick Grope, the shortstop, hit third, and they went right, left, right in the batting order. It wasn't until later on, I think sometime in 65, where they flipped and Brock became the leadoff hitter, Flood the number two hitter, and we all know about what Brock did with stealing bases. But at the time they got him, he was the number two hitter in the order. And of course, they played him in left field too, which was a big difference. The Cubs tried playing him in center, and Lou went in center field.
What other memories do you have, Andy, or anybody else that you want to throw out there?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't also put up Mr. Javier as one of my dad's all-time favorite players, along with Cepeda. So you always think of my dad every time I see or talk about these guys or this time frame with the Cardinals. So yeah, that's one of my favorite memories. Sharing those experiences with my dad, and my grandfather. So that always brings back a lot of memories of being a kid. And they're talking about that. And I remember hanging out with my grandfather a lot, and some of his people from his favorite watering hole would always, because they'd be back in the mid 70s, late 70s when, being there, and they had the game on. I think it was probably KSDK at the time, if I remember correctly. And they had the broadcast, with Buck on, obviously on the radio, because they didn't want to listen to the TV broadcast. And you hear all these guys, thinking, oh my gosh, at that time, these guys are ancient to me. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these guys talking about Marty Marion and, and Frankie Frisch, and this guy can't do this, and that guy could never play like this. And, and so it's just a lot of memories, listening to those guys talk about the Cardinal teams back then. And plus the Cardinals weren't playing too well during that time period. So it's nice to hear about, this World Series team and the 67 team as well.
Before I ask, go ahead, Steve.
What was really interesting there was I remember Harry Carey used to call Javier Hooley because he couldn't pronounce his name. So it was like H-O-O, Hooley. And, Javier was one of five starters, five regulars that the Cardinals got in trades. to build that 64 team. Bill White came from the Giants, Javier and Dick Grote from the Pirates, Kurt Flood from the Reds, and Brock, the final piece from the Cubs. So 5 of those guys that started were via trades, and it all came together in 64. 63, they were close. They got within a game of the Dodgers late in the season. The Dodgers swept a 3-game series from them, kept them out of it. Then in 64, once Brock got going, then it was a fight to the finish. As I think we talked about earlier, 5 teams within 5 games of each other as the season ended. The Braves finished 5 out, the Giants 3, the Phillies and Reds were a game out, and the Cardinals won it. And the Cardinals had to win the last game of the season to get in. And at one point, they were 6.5 games behind the Phillies with 2 weeks to go. Phillies lost 10 in a row, fell into 3rd place, and then the Phillies beat the Reds the last 2 games to keep the Reds from tying the Cardinals or passing them, and had the Reds split the last 2 games with the Phillies, it could have forced a playoff, or had they won the last 2 and the Phillies would have ended with a 12-game losing streak, the Reds would have gone. So everything went the Cardinals' way, but it took till the final day of the season to decide it. And St. Louis was so excited because they were really close in 63, and it was the first time since 46 that they had been in the World Series. So it was a very excitable time.
Yeah, something you just pointed out too. That is and that would have been the first time without Stan Musial on the World Series team in a very long time as well.
And Stan retired at the end of the 63 season, and he even said in 64, if I was playing left field and the Cardinals hadn't gotten Lou Brock, they wouldn't have won. So Brock was a catalyst there. And then, of course, Bob Gibson, started coming to his own that year, although Ray Sadecki was the team's top winner with 20 games, but Gibson won 2 in the World Series. The only thing is he had to pitch in relief the final day of the regular season for the Cardinals to clinch it, so he couldn't start game 1 of the World Series. That's why Sadecki started.
Hey, Andy, real quickly before I ask, I got a really great question to ask Steve here in just a second, but you have to share this story. I know you've done it only one other time on our show, but tell Steve about what your name almost was when you were born in the big debate between your mom and your dad.
Well, my dad, as I said, was a big Cepeda and Javier fan. So my name was either going to be Orlando Cepeda Teague or Julian Javier Teague. And they fought for almost a week. I went without a name on my birth certificate until my dad finally backed down from my mom. And I always tell Brian I would have been the toughest kid in my school if I had either one of those names growing up. But I would have been honored to have either one of them also at the same time. So yeah, it always makes me laugh every time my mom and I still share that story, because she said she stuck her feet in the ground on that one. So,
your nickname might have been Hooli at one time. Or
I know. It could have been, yeah.
Baby Bull.
Yeah.
Hey, I would have taken that.
So, Steve, I got to ask you, you brought up a great point about Flood and Brock at the top of the, order. Wasn't it, if I recall, the Cubs really didn't have Lou run. Wasn't it Johnny Keane's decision to really start letting opening up?
Yeah, the Cubs wanted Lou to be a power hitter, and he did have power, but he did strike out a lot. And the other mistake, as I mentioned, they had him in center field. He wasn't a center fielder. He was a left fielder. And when the Cardinals got him, they told him, "You're going to run." And he said, "Okay." And he started stealing bases, started hitting it. He did it. One year he did hit 21 homers, but he was, known more for hitting 3,000 hits, stolen bases. And he just came alive in St. Louis. And Ernie Broglio may have been damaged goods when he went to the Cubs. Nobody knows for sure, or hurt his arm later on there, but he never really, enjoyed the success he had in St. Louis. For one year he won 21 games, another year he won 18. So the Brock for Broglio trade is known, throughout baseball is maybe the worst or best deal in baseball history, if you don't count Babe Ruth being sold from the Red Sox.
Right. So one other quick thing about Kurt Flood, and then we'll kind of move on about some more of the collection, and Andy and I can show some more cards and talk about some of the ones that are the difficult ones in the set. I'm fortunate that I have all of the every run, including the team leaders, and we'll talk about that in a second. But a little bit about Kurt Flood. I think that came out in one of those. I don't know if it was a 30 for 30 on ESPN, but back around 2009, 2010. Obviously everyone knows about what he did for free agency, but I did read that at one point, that he was kind of separated from his wife, may have even have been divorced. But where I'm going with this story is that when he was like hanging out either in Italy or Spain, it came to light that he was supposedly this great artist and would do all these great portrait paintings for all these people. In fact, a lot of people spent a lot of money on it. He had a great portrait of JFK and many other celebrities and stuff. And then as he, somehow was dodging some of his financial problems because he didn't, play, he was over in Italy or Spain. I can't remember which. And anyway, it came to light that no, he really wasn't, that he had actually hired people to do these portraits. Have either one of you guys ever heard that story?
I've heard that he was a talented artist, but I haven't heard the story you mentioned. And he was a very, I guess thoughtful might not be the word, but he thought things out, very carefully. And I'm sure the decision to challenge baseball reserve clause wasn't an easy one. And a lot of people forget how good a player he was. I mean, he had a career batting average of 291. Now, he wasn't a home run hitter because he was a leadoff or number 2 hitter. And he won at least 7 Gold Gloves, I think maybe all in a row at one time, when he was competing against people like Willie Mays and Roberto Clemente. So he was a very good player. Whether he was a Hall of Fame player himself, I don't know. That's debatable. But coupled with the fact that what he did to transform baseball, especially with Marvin Miller going in, I think he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Great. No, that's what I was going to ask you, Andy. What's your take on not on the portrait stuff, but on Kurt, being enshrined in Cooperstown?
I agree. I think he has a very special place in baseball history. So I definitely think he belongs there. Not only just for his playing abilities, but how he changed the face of the game and how we see it today. And and after, unfortunately, he didn't get to reap the benefits of it, but a lot of other people sure have. So, they should be wearing his number once a day every year too, because he really did a lot for the players, for standing up to Major League Baseball. So
he basically sacrificed his career.
Yeah, definitely.
For others to follow him, and it took somebody to do that, and he was the guy that did it. So,
yeah, and I agree with your take, Steve. If Marvin Miller is in there, then there has to be room then for Kurt in the Hall of Fame. So I agree with that. But moving on and to just the collection in itself in the 64 team, and then we can jump in with some other fun facts about the 64 World Series, et cetera, et cetera. So
how about this guy? Yeah. So if you're a Cardinal fan, everybody knows that guy. So
there were 4 St. Louis products on that team too. Mike Shannon went to CBC, who started in right field. Charlie James, backup outfielder, was from Webster Groves, Missouri. Jerry Buchek, utility infielder, went to McKinley High in St. Louis. And Dal Maxwell was from Granite City. And Dal was a backup shortstop, basically behind Grove. But then when Julian Javier got hurt in the World Series, Maxwell played at second base, and he's the one you see catching the pop-up from Bobby Richardson to clinch Game 7 of the World Series. So there was a lot of local talent on that team too.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to have you talk about Hooley getting hurt and having the pride of Granite City sliding over and playing second base. So thank you for mentioning that. Hey, we gotta talk about everybody's favorite card in the 64 set. Andy, we got to show card number 543 of some guy named Bob Uecker.
Oh, yeah.
In his Braves uniform, by the way.
Correct. Yep. Definitely in the Braves uniform in that photograph.
Now, if you get the 65 Uecker card, where he's Cardinal, that's the one where he's batting left-handed.
Yep.
And he just did that as a prank, like Lou Burdett did on the 59 card for the Braves, where he's throwing left-handed. But Uecker did that as a prank.
I actually wish they would have made a card, somewhere in the run with him with that tuba.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that would have been
catching the baseballs,
Yeah.
too. Well, he always kidded about that. He said, I was with the 64 Cardinals, and they thought so much of me, they put that big statue outside of Busch Stadium, but then they had me batting left-handed, so I'm not sure what that was about.
Right.
Talk about the Musial statue, obviously.
Yeah.
Lou Burdett.
Yeah. Another tough card in this particular set. One of the high numbers. I want to put somebody up here real quick because I don't think he ever gets enough credit for some of the Cardinal teams during that time period.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because I think he's overlooked.
One of the best.
Yeah.
What's your take on Bill White, Steve?
Well, I'm glad he went in the Cardinal Hall of Fame, and, one of the best Cardinal first basemen of all time. And the Cardinals had some great deals with the Giants over the years. They got Bill White, they got Orlando Cepeda, they got Jack Clark, and they also got a guy named Ernie Broglio. He originally was with the Giants. They got him from the Giants. So they've made some good deals. If you count Clark as a first baseman, you could say they got 3 first basemen from the Giants, and Will Clark, who was a first baseman for the Giants, also played for the Cardinals, but they got him through the Orioles. But Bill White was a gamer. I mean, 59 through 65, Gold Glove fielder, good hitter, all-star, did it all. Very underrated. I'm glad he's finally went into the St. Louis Hall of Fame, and then he went on, to fame in New York, and eventually became National League president. Wrote a great book. It's called Uppity. If you ever get a chance to read it, it's talking about his life and all the things he went through, and it's very inspiring.
So, Steve, when you were a member of the Baseball Writers Association, was that just based on local awards, for the St. Louis team? Talk a little bit about what being a part of that organization is about.
Well, I was only for a couple of years, so I didn't really get a chance to vote in any of the awards, but I got to participate in going to Cardinal games. I usually go to about 20 or 30 a year when I was working at the Alton Telegraph, and had the good fortune to see 7 World Series starting, with the 82, 1, 85, 87, 04, 06, 11, and 13. So it was really fun to see, different Cardinal eras. Whitey Herzog was great to talk to. He was sort of like an extension of Casey Stengel. He could tell great stories. Tony La Russa was more cerebral, intellectual. Analytical is probably the best word to describe him. But it was interesting to talk to him the way he thought about things, if you could get him to talk about it. But you see different players in different eras, and how they respond. And World Series time in St. Louis was just great, and I was really fortunate to go to 7 of them.
You were mentioning the connection to the Giants. That's what I was just getting ready to show right after this.
Because we've been talking about him, but we didn't put him up there, so I gotta give Gibby some there. So
yeah, number 460. So he's kind of that mid-tier high number card, kind of difficult to find. But yeah, that's probably my favorite card in the 64 set. But when Steve was talking about the Giants, I'm always amazed at how many managers at some point either came up through the Cardinal organization or played for him for a cup of coffee or for a couple of seasons. So I remember
the interesting thing about Roger Craig, he won the pivotal game for the Cardinals in the 64 World Series. He won Game 4, the Boyer Grand Slam off Al Downing. Ray Sadecki got knocked out early. Roger Craig came in, pitched 4 or 5 shutout innings. Ron Taylor finished up. But Craig got the win in that 4-3 victory, and that sort of turned the series around. And Gibson won Game 5, the Yankees Game 6, and Gibson came back in 7. But Ron Taylor, he had the big save in that game, and Taylor then went on and was a reliever for the '69 Miracle Mets too. So he got another World Series ring in '69 with them.
We're going to throw Johnny Keane up here because something unusual happened with him and Yogi Berra that particular season. So, Steve, you want to talk about that? Because you probably know more about that than we do.
Well, Johnny Keane, the Cardinals were going to fire him for different reasons, particularly Gussie Busch was mad at him about some certain things. And then the Cardinals won the pennant, and they were going to rehire him. But in the meantime, Bush had fired Bing Devine as the general manager, and Devine was the guy who hired Johnny Keane. And they held a press conference to announce Johnny Keane's rehiring as a Cardinal manager. And Johnny surprised everybody by announcing he was the new manager of the New York Yankees. And that caught everybody with the Cardinal organization flat-footed. And they didn't know what to do, so they wound up making Red Shandies as their manager. Keane replaced Yogi Berra, who he had managed against in the '64 series, and Berra was out for whatever reason. I don't know. And oddly enough, Keane never won in New York, and after '64, it took the Yankees more than a decade to get back to the World Series after they had been in the World Series between 1949 and 1964 every year but 2 times. So that was sort of the end of the Yankee dynasty in '64. And the Cardinals were coming on then. They slipped a little in '65, '66, retooled, and won in '67. Should have won in '68, but they were there 3 times in 5 years, I guess, '64 through '68. But the Yankees went on a downward spiral after that and didn't recover till the late '70s. And then Yogi Berra went from the Yankees to the Mets, got more World Series rings. He was a coach on the '69 team that won, and he managed them later on when they went to the World Series.
So I also wanted to showcase this one. It's a high number. It's 568. It's the NL leaders with Cap Peterson and Phil Gagliano. Steve, you were talking at the beginning of the show about the Memphis connection. So talk a little bit about Gagliano.
Well, Gagliano came from Memphis. He was a utility infielder, very versatile player for the Cardinals, and very important because he could play second, short, and third. And he was good defensively at all 3 positions, and he was good at getting on base. He wasn't a power hitter, but he could hit well enough and sub in for Grote or Boyer or Javier and do a good job. And of course, Tim McCarver was from Memphis too, and the Cardinals signed him as a teenager, and he came up in, I want to say '62 maybe, and eventually took over as the catcher, and one year led the league in triples as a catcher, believe it or not. I want to say maybe '66 or so, and stayed with the Cardinals, was on the Cardinals '64, '67, '68 World Series teams, and then went on, played for the Phillies, played for several teams, and became a nationally celebrated broadcaster.
And you had mentioned this guy too, so I want to give him some love. One of the other
Charlie James, another St. Louisan, Webster, the pride of Webster Groves. Charlie was on the '64 team. Unfortunately, he got traded in '65 along with Roger Craig to the Reds for Bob Perky in a deal that didn't really work out. Bob Housen, who then was the GM, moved a lot of people in '65 and '66. Bill White, Dick Grote, Bob Uecker went to the Phillies. He had a couple of young guys he wanted to play. They didn't work out. But then he traded Ray Sadecki for Orlando Cepeda, and that basically is what got the Cardinals going in '67. Plus, they had some young pitchers such as Steve Carlton, Nelson Briles, Ray Washburn, and Larry Jaster that came along to back Bob Gibson. So
So this is one of the things, Steve, that Andy and I always like to showcase, because we can consider the leader cards as part of the team set. So there's a little bit of debate there, but the reason why I like to bring it up, and then I'll let Andy do his take, is so I collect only Cardinal cards. And so I don't have, cards of Hammer and Hank, or I don't have cards of, Roberto, Bob Clemente, Tommy Davis. And there's again Hank Aaron, and I say yes, I do. They're on the leader cards. So again, the debate for us is a lot of people don't consider having the leader cards or checklists as part of their team sets. And Andy and I go, if it mentions or shows a Cardinal player, we have it. Andy, you're pretty much, I know, in agreement on that.
Oh yeah.
One tidbit there about Hank Aaron, everybody knows about his home run prowess. Hank hit more home runs than any other player against the Cardinals. He hit 91. So when you hear people say that somebody hit 40 or 45 against the Cardinals, that's good, but it's not 91.
Right.
91 home runs against the Cardinals. And of course, Hank, when he played mostly with the Braves, it was an 8-team league, so he's playing against 7 teams. So most of the teams he played against, he hit anywhere from 80 to 100 home runs. So it's not surprising that he hit that many against the Cardinals. But if that's a trivia question, what player hit the most home runs against the Cardinals? It's Henry Aaron with 91.
And what was the story behind him, real quickly, Steve, and then I'll let Andy show the next card before we get ready to wrap up. What made him such, in your opinion? Was it just I always just was told or read stories about he just had incredibly quick wrists.
Strong and quick wrists. He could wait till the last minute. There were stories of when the catcher was going to catch. Tim McCarver told a story about he was ready to grab the baseball, and Aaron swung at it so quickly and so late, they basically almost hit it out of his glove and then hit it out of the park. But he had such strong and powerful and quick wrist. He could wait on a pitch forever. And you look at baseball now, there are not a lot of just pure wrist hitters. Ernie Banks was a little bit of one. Gary Sheffield comes to mind a little bit. Aaron just had the ability to turn on a ball at the last second and hit it wherever he wanted.
And Andy, who are you getting ready to show up next?
Well, I was going to throw up Boyer, because there's always a lot of debate on whether or not he should be in the Hall of Fame. So, Steve, kind of get your thoughts on that.
I think so. I think he was as good as Ron Santo. I mean, they have comparable numbers, and Ron Santo's in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if, with Ken Boyer dying, not at a young age, but, dying before he really should have, in my opinion, that hurt him a little bit. But he was the equal of Ron Santo, and Ron Santo's in the Hall of Fame, and that tells me that Boyer should be in there. He was one of the best third basemen in the 60s. Eddie Matthews of the Braves was right up there, and Matthews is in the Hall of Fame too. But yeah, I think Ken Boyer should be in there.
NL Hall of Fame, and one of my favorite cards of Ken Boyer is the card of him and Mickey Mantle together as the NL and AL MVPs. So yeah, I'm not trying to be a homer Cardinal fan here, but I always think that he should be in there. And Andy, one of the questions that I think that we should talk about sometime, Steve can join us, or we can post it on Twitter or do all of the above, is, and I'll ask this question to each one of you, and then I promise we'll wrap up. So I've always thought about every 20 years, and maybe it's 15. I'll let Steve kind of weigh in on it here, you too, Andy. But at every 20 years that Major League Baseball, at least Cooperstown, should take a look, talk to an organization, and give serious consideration to at least one player from every team for strong consideration for, the Hall of Fame. And I'll give a couple of quick answers, and then I'll turn it over to each one of you for your take. So my first guy, that I would stump hard for as the Cardinal organization, if I was given this opportunity, would be Ken Boyer. If I'm the Minnesota Twins, I'm going to go with Tony Oliva. If I'm the Pittsburgh Pirates, I'm either going to go with Dave Parker, or I'm maybe going to go with Al Oliver. What are your takes on that, Andy? And then
that's a good idea. The Braves, you could say Dale Murphy, you could say Fred McGriff. There are a lot of guys that are I don't want to say borderline, but probably deserve to be in. And as the years go by, they start to fade from memory. Sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind. That's why I'm so glad to see Ted Simmons get in, because I thought he was sort of going to fade away, and then all of a sudden people remembered what he did. One other interesting note about Boyer, 64 World Series, his brother Cleet played third base for the Yankees. So you had the Boyer brothers playing against each other in the 64 World Series. And one other intriguing thing about that World Series, the Yankees have won more World Series than any team, the Cardinals more than any National League team, but they haven't played each other since 1964, which is sort of mind-boggling. That the two of the Yankees with the most World Series appeared and the Cardinals with the most National League haven't met in 57 years. You would have thought as many times as both were in, somewhere along the line they would meet after that.
I think if you look at just the past couple decades, the Cardinals got on a pretty good run, once Jocketty and La Russa got in there, and even when Whitey was there. But then you have it's like they're never on the same plane, It's either Yankees are down, the Cards are up, the Cards are down, the Yankees are up, so they don't really get that opportunity. And they're both in the wild card hunt, so maybe this is the year. Maybe that happens out of the wild card. Who knows? It's like it's always wanted to see a Yankee Cards World Series again, take place. So hopefully maybe that's somewhere in the future. So since they're both so legendary.
Mm-hmm. And what's your take on if you were to go around, because Major League Baseball's made a lot of really unique rules, I'll just call them that. I'm not even going to get into that debate with because of COVID and some of their other decisions. But what do you think about, the opportunity for a team such as the Cardinals, the Rangers, the Twins, whoever, Pirates to come up and say, not necessarily, but I mean, put it up against a panel of red ribbon folks who look at the sabermetrics like they did for Simba in order for him to get into the Hall of Fame. I really do think that there has to be some tweak or some way to kind of, make an amendment because of, the players that I've named and the players that Steve named that I think, honestly should be in there. So what's your thought on that, Andy?
Well, I think you could maybe do it by decade, possibly do something like that, then pool the players together, then have them vote, on players from all those teams, because, and if you look at some teams, they may not have a Hall of Fame caliber person during that particular time frame, so because if you go back and look like maybe because of the newer teams like the Rockies or the Rays or teams like that, Diamondbacks, and maybe they do, they have a long period. Obviously we've, Randy Johnson pitched, for the Mariners and the Diamondbacks and the Astros, but, so where does he fall, then again, where do these guys fall in these particular situations? What team would they fall on? So I guess there could be a lot of debate on that. I think it's a good idea to give an opportunity to relook some of these guys that, like Steve said, are, kind of overlooked and kind of fade out of memory. But when you look at them during that period of time that they played in, they were the best. Fred McGriff, you just mentioned him. I mean, it seemed like he was hitting a home run every time, and he was, and maybe he hit like 40 home runs a season, but that's a big deal at the time that he was hitting 40 home runs in a season. So it's, guys like that. And, there's guys with the Cardinals too, in different teams like Ken Boyer. And, I even stumped for a guy that's even newer than that, Jim Edmonds. I think look at how he changed the face of the Cardinals when he got there for that time period he was there. And even when he was with the Angels, he was a spectacular player. Defensively, offensively. So just guys like that, I think they don't get enough, look because they're from St. Louis, they're not on the East Coast, the West Coast, but, we're in the Midwest. And the only ones that normally do is Chicago because, that's the kind of the New York of the Midwest. So I think that's a great idea, actually.
And Steve, one other quick question to you then, outside of the Cardinals and that, is there any of your, childhood favorite players who have been overlooked from another team?
Well, you mentioned Tony Oliva is one, and a guy that played for the Cardinals, Dick Allen. Dick, he's got some great stats too. I think maybe one thing to do, I'm not totally familiar with them, is maybe expand the Veterans Committee and go for legacy type players, or more try to get the players into the Hall of Fame, possibly through the Veterans Committee, expand that, or give them more leeway, more things where they can add players there too. That might be a possible way to get some of the quote unquote old timers in there.
Yep, and some of the Friends of Baseball. I'd like to see a committee almost made up of that, so you can get guys like a Dave Duncan and some of the outstanding pitching coaches over the years that have really helped transform their teams. Or I know this doesn't count, but do you take a look at someone almost like a Jose Oquendo, who's been with an organization so long in terms of a player and a coach and what he means to all the players, at the minor league level. And then you start looking at guys like George Kissel or a Hub Kittle, within organizations. Every organization like that has some iconic person that I think is overlooked, and there's got to be, maybe a wing or something that's called, Friends of Baseball, or I'm just making that up. I have no idea.
Contributors to the game might be a good one,
yeah.
Where you're not necessarily a player, but as in George Kissel's case, you're involved in development, or Dave Duncan's case in coaching. You could have all kinds of, different people that have done different things through the years, and a lot of good things, funneled into that area.
I agree. All righty. Well, on that note, I think we should probably get ready to wrap up this program. Great talk. Steve, the penalty, as Andy and I like to say, is if you do a good job, then unfortunately we're going to ask you to come back as a guest. So I hope that is a compliment.
Well, I would be happy to be back anytime. And I thank you guys so much for inviting me, and would relish the opportunity to do it again. And I really enjoyed it. And it's great talking with you guys.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, your insight is tremendous. That's why I was telling Andy. I said I knew what was going to happen. I was going to look up and have that oh heck moment where we're out of time on the first one and have to do a second recording to edit together. But that's a good thing. So, Steve, anything that you have coming up that you want to promote real quickly? I know you said you got a couple of events, and we'll do that, and then we'll close.
Well, I'm on a lot of committees: Illinois Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame Committee. And different committees now that I'm retired. One thing we're having is a celebration of life for the late Larry Graham, who was a basketball coach at Madison and SIUE and did a lot of good things. And it's going to be on October 8th at 6:00 at Arlington Greens Golf Course near Granite City. So if you want to just come out and pay your respects, if you know Larry or heard of him and would like to hear some good stories about him, most of them are true. Please come out. So I enjoy doing those kinds of things.
Definitely. And I know you're a good moderator of different things. I've seen you do that as well. So on that note, Steve, again, we greatly appreciate you joining us. Andy, your closing thoughts.
Yeah, Steve, I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge and experience, and always love talking baseball with different people. And certainly you're like an encyclopedia of knowledge for, baseball. So that's great to be able to talk to you as well. So always looking forward to doing this again with you.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. And everybody, you can follow us. We're BirdBrain66 on our YouTube channel, which we're on right now, BirdBrain66, Facebook, BirdBrain66, and our Twitter account at BirdBrain66. So with that, we'll close. Thank you all for watching and joining.
Yep. Thanks. Appreciate it.